We have the accounting equation. The accounting equation says that assets equals liabilities plus stockholders' equity. What this means is that there are multiple ways to finance your business. And we talked about it before. Starbucks finances its business with retained earnings, right? How does Ford finance its business? Where does Ford's capital funding seems to come from? Debt. It borrows money. So Starbucks would be heavy on the stockholders' equity, light on the liabilities, whereas Ford would be heavy on the liabilities and light on the stockholders' equity. So the idea is that there are different ways of funding your operations. You can either borrow your money with debt, liabilities, or you can raise capital, that's stockholders' equity. And each has its pros and its cons. The thing with debt is that you have to pay it back. Furthermore, with debt, you have to pay interest. So when you're dealing with debt, you have to make every interest payment and you have to make every principal payment that's required of you. Otherwise, you'll be in default on your debt, and then your creditors may be entitled to either force you into bankruptcy or to take some of your assets away from you. On the other hand, with equity, equity means if you're financing your operations with equity, that means that you have to share your profits with the new stockholders because you're letting new stockholders in. So that means you're going to have to share your profits with them. You're accepting a partner. Now, what happens is that, and again, if you're going to have dividends, let's say you're an owner, you own 1,000 shares of stock, and you want to raise debt, you want to raise capital with equity. You bring in another owner, you give them 1,000 shares of stock, and now you're only a 50% partner. If you want to pay yourself dividends, you've got to pay dividends to the other owners also and share that ownership. So the question is, you can't just borrow money for free, or you can't just raise capital and get it for nothing. Rather, if you're going to raise capital, it's got to come from one place or the other. Either you have to borrow the money and make payments on it, interest and principal, or you have to sell stock and dilute your ownership shares by selling shares to somebody else. So what this does is it creates risk. It creates a situation where if you're going to borrow money and you're going to borrow a lot of money, then that's going to create what's called financial risk for your business. Because if you miss a single debt payment because you don't have the cash flow to cover it, then you're going to be in trouble. You miss a debt payment, you're in default on your debt, and that creates all kinds of problems. Anyone ever see these things on TV? They don't run them as much as they used to, but they're still there if you watch them. And they're on the radio too. On anyone here know how to get rich quick in real estate? You do? It's a pity, maybe. It's a pity Adler's not here because he would explain how to do the whole thing. You know how to get rich quick in real estate, maybe? Okay, so we're going to pick your brain on this a little bit. I don't know why this is not working. Tell me how to get rich quick in real estate.
Is it buying foreclosures? Or
buying foreclosures, okay.
And like, I guess fixing them up and renting them rather than selling them back so you can have like steady cash flow.
But how do you buy a foreclosure? Where do you get the money from?
I'm thinking you're in that.
Well, no, because you want to get rich quick. The whole idea is I don't have any money now and I want to be rich. Right? If I don't have any money, I can't buy foreclosures and fix them up because that costs money. And you can't, contrary to what they have on the TV commercials, you can't buy a foreclosure for $250.
Can you like get investors kind of? And,
Get investors?
yeah, so you would,
But the thing is, I don't want to share the profits with anybody because then I won't be rich. I'll be making other people rich. I want to make myself rich, Nora. An all-cash loan, what's that?
Well, you can buy foreclosures with cash.
Yeah.
So you've got an all-cash loan, but the interest rate is around $200 a day. I watch a lot of HGTV.
So where do you get it all for 200%? What? How much?
It's like the interest is like $200 a day.
On how much of a loan?
This one was $349,000 cash loan.
So you buy an all cash loan and they just give you cash and you take the cash, you buy the property.
And then you have to put money into.
Or another thing you can do is something called a seller financed mortgage. This is great. So you have, you know, there's a senior citizen has been living in the same house for 100 years. I was born in this house. I need to move out, whatever, and just wants to move out. And you happen to know them, and they want to sell their house. And so I don't have any money. So what I do instead is say, I'll tell you what, sell me your house for $300,000 and you hold a mortgage on the house. So rather than my paying you $300,000, I'll pay you the mortgage payments. And this way you can take the mortgage payments and you can live off that money. So $300,000 house, mortgage payments are, let's say, $2,400 a month. She can take the $2,400 a month and go and pay, you know, let's say for the retirement living house or wherever, go live in Florida. In Florida, for $2,400 a month, that makes you a millionaire. And so she can live in Florida and $2,400 a month and do very nicely. So I can buy the house from her on $2,400 a month, and I just paid this mortgage for the next 30 years or to her heirs. What I do, meanwhile, is I rent out the house. And let's say I rent out the house for $3,000 a month. And then I pay her $2,400 a month. And I also pay, let's say, real estate taxes of $500 a month. That's not very realistic. So that means I would have positive cash flow left of only $100 a month. $3,000 minus $2,900 is $100 a month. Now, when you look at it, you must be saying to yourself, I'm not going to make very much money, right? Because I'm making $100 a month. That's not, $3,000 comes in rent, $2,900 goes out, and I've only got $100 a month left for myself. And if anything goes wrong, I'm going to have to pay that money out. What's the upside here?
You don't need to need startup cash.
I got in without paying a penny of my own money. The seller is paying for the house. So I got in without any of my own money. What else? The upside. How am I going to make? How am I going to make money on this now? What's going to happen to the value of the house over time?
It's gonna increase.
The value of the house is going to appreciate. Who gets all that appreciation? When I go and sell the house 5 years from now, who's going to get all that money? Okay, let's say I sell the house 5 years from now for $400,000. I pay off the rest of the mortgage, let's say $280,000, right? And the remaining $70,000 is mine. So I invested no money, and I walked away 5 years later with $70,000. Now, you think I'm making all this up, right? Well, let me just show you the numbers here, right? So I sell for $350,000, less pay the mortgage, which I have to pay off because I still owe the seller $280,000, equals $70,000 profit. Initial costs, what? Zero. Nothing. I paid nothing. Remember? She gave me the house and agreed to accept mortgage payments. Now, what happens if something goes wrong? Let's say that a tenant moves into the house and trashes the house. It cost me $1,000 to clean it up. Then I only made $69,000 profit. That's not such a bad deal either. This looks pretty good, right? All right, so let's say something goes wrong, right? Let's say the value of the house goes down. Could that happen? Sure. Value of the house goes down to $250,000. So I go to sell it. The house is worth $250,000. The mortgage is $280,000. What do? No. Why would I lose $30,000 willingly? I mail the keys to the mortgage holder. I mail the key, take the keys to house, put them in an envelope, and mail it to the old lady. Let her foreclose on the house. But wait, of course it's bad. But follow what's going on here, right? If the value of the house goes, do I lose does she have the rights to foreclose on the house? Yeah. So if I can't make the mortgage payments, then I'll let her foreclose on the house, and rather give her our time and have her call the lawyer and everything, just put the keys in an envelope, mail it off to her, say, here, I changed my mind.
But so technically she still owns the house?
Yeah, because she has the mortgage. She owns the house legally. So let her foreclose on the house, and I didn't lose anything. So do you follow what's going on here? I have upside risk. In other words, a chance of making a lot of money. What happens if the value of the house goes down? The downside risk is other people's. It's called other people's money, OPM. Right? It's all on HGTV. Nora, right? This is all on HGTV, right? You just mail them the keys. No hard feelings. Here's your house. So if you follow this, I don't want to really comment on the ethics of it because there are ethical problems. So what's to go wrong? It's still possible you could be in a negative position. Because what could happen is I could buy the house, and then it costs so much money, and put money in, either to repair the house or to do some kind of maintenance or something to fix the house up. Whatever it is, I put some money into the house. So to that extent, I may have downside risk. In other words, a risk of losing money. But overall, the risk situation here is I can maximize my risk of making money on the house and taking the risk of losing money and give that to other people. Isn't this beautiful? Now, if you build a business on debt, you can't always walk away from debt. Right? That's the problem here. The problem here is that you can't always walk away from debt. And in the real world, see what banks caught on to this after a few years. It took them a few years of the mortgage crisis for them to figure out that they don't have to foreclose on houses. And instead, even if they have to foreclose on a house, they could still go after the buyer for the difference. So what happened was banks caught on to this after a couple years, and they realized that if I can just mail them back the keys, but then they can sue me for the $30,000 difference or any other money they lose on the foreclosure. So they had that legal right, and no one really exercised that until a couple of years ago when they realized that they need to. And so when property values dropped, suddenly the banks started suing people for all this extra money.
Do people actually sell it right into mortgage?
Yeah. Yeah, or more likely what they do is, it's hard to find the right seller here. You have to find a seller who's willing to do this. And it's hard to find the right seller. So one option is foreclosure and have the bank finance it. Another option, I know people have done this, is to get outside investors. So you have outside investors fund it, and then they get a more secure, they may have a loan and may have a share in the house. There are various ways to pull this off. But this is very attractive to someone who doesn't want the money immediately. And legally, it's not a bad option for them either. So what they can do this way is they have a stream of cash flow. Think about it. Someone who's 60, 70 years old, has a 30-year mortgage, and is going to rely on a $2,400 check every month. So that's actually almost better than getting the money itself, getting all the money for the house. And what happens if the seller, the seller isn't able to come through and stops paying? They can reclaim the house. They can foreclose on the house and take it back, and they still have their house.
What happens if the